A very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Aaron Chua, and I'm a principal lecturer from the Digital Strategy and Leadership Practice in NUS ISS. Thank you for taking time to attend this session, Diagnosing Complex Problems Using System Archetypes. Without further ado, let's get started. In both our personal and work life, we are facing all sorts of challenges and problems. At a global scale, we are facing extreme weather caused by climate change. Like in Europe recently, they experienced flooding, drought, fire, and heat wave. At the same time, the world is facing threat of food shortage because of the climate change. This situation is exacerbated by the current Ukraine and Russia conflict, where grains were stuck in Ukraine and cannot be exported until very recently. Even in Singapore, we have to look for alternative chicken source when Malaysia imposed a chicken export ban in June this year due to supply shortage. Not only that, in our business environment, the influx of disruptors are challenging existing market and value network. We have Grab disrupting the transportation industry, Airbnb disrupting the hospitality industry, WeWork disrupting the traditional workspace industry, and Impossible Food disrupting the F&B industry. So, is your current industry challenged by disruptor? If yes, you know the pains and challenges. Or perhaps you're part of the disruptor, looking at new ways to disrupt the traditional giants. At a personal level, we could be worried about whether we can afford our first flat or next flat, especially when we are seeing more million-dollar HDB flat transactions recently. Or perhaps a simpler challenge, like how to get to my destination in the fastest and cheapest manner, especially now when most of the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. The current world that we are in can be best described as VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Not only do we have a lot of problems to tackle and resolve, different problems will require different strategy and solution. We cannot repeat our favorite solution to all the problems we face. There is just no one-size-fits-all for everything. To help us understand and identify the strategy that we can use to tackle the different challenges, we can use the Cynefin Framework. This framework is a tool that guides us when making decisions to solve problems by analyzing the context in which the decisions are made. There's a total of 5 contexts defined by their relationship between cause and effect. The right side of the Cynefin framework is considered as the order state. This is when the cause and effect are predictable and we can get consistent outcome over and over again. The first context we have on the order state is the clear context, also known as known knowns. Here, the answer to the problem are usually quite obvious, self-evident, and undisputed. An example of a clear context problem is when the printout of a printer is faded. The solution here is pretty obvious. Change the printer ink cartridge, as is well documented and proven to be working. The next context on the order state is the complicated context, also known as known unknowns. Here, the cause and effect relationship exists, but it's not self-evident. And once the root cause is clear, we might need to bring expertise to help resolve it. In addition, there could be multiple ways to tackle a complicated problem. An example of a complicated context problem is when coaching a team. As a coach, you know how to do it, but you have to adapt your style and method according to the team dynamics. You just can't use one standard style to coach teams of various maturities. The left side of the Cynefin framework is considered as the unordered state. This is when the cause and effect are unpredictable. The first context on this side is a complex context, also known as unknown unknowns. Here, we need to be able to conduct safe-to-fail experiment and then respond by amplifying or dampening the experiment iteratively and accordingly in order to resolve the problem. An example of a complex context problem is when we develop an IT product. The next context is the chaotic context, also known as unknownables. With no clear cause and effect, the first action is to stabilize the situation fast and then make sense of it before responding to it accordingly. An example of a chaotic context problem is a war or a terrorist attack. And the final context is known as disorder. This context represents situation where there's no clear clarity about which of the other domain applies. It might even be the case where multiple contexts exist at the same time. For the purpose of this session, we'll focus on the complex context. In the complex context, we have unknowns. The first unknown refers to the unknown root cause. Or rather, when analyzed, we can only roughly know the root cause with no clear absolute certainty of how much each contribute and whether there are other root causes. To reveal the root cause, we need to do safe-to-fail experiment in an iterative way, and we need to even explore what are the right questions to ask. The second unknown refers to the unknown solution. Even with an initial solution identified, we do not know if the solution will work for sure, and we need to inspect the result of the solution and adapt accordingly. One of the techniques to understand the root cause of complex problems is system archetypes. So, what are system archetypes? System archetypes are defined as common subsystem patterns of side effects and action and reaction found within complex systems. They have the ability to unfold the complexity within this system and provide us with an effective aiding tool in understanding the problem. There are a total of 10 different archetypes, and for today's session, we'll look at 5 of them. Balancing process with delay, fixes that fail, success to the successful, drifting goals, and shifting the burden. So, let's get started. This grim story began in the sugarcane plantation in Queensland, Australia in the 1930s. The sugarcane crops, which were a major source of income for Australia, were facing huge losses due to the native cane beetles. The beetles larvae were eating the roots of the sugarcane and killing the plant, resulting in massive losses for the farmers. As adult cane beetles have a heavy exoskeleton and their legs and larvae are often buried deep underground, it's difficult to exterminate them. Under tremendous pressure from the farmers, the Australian government decided to act. They decided to bring cane toads, native to South and Central America, to feed on the cane beetles. So, in 1935, a total of 102 cane toads were flew in, probably in business class, from Hawaii to Australia, to be released in the sugarcane plantation. Their mission was to hunt and kill the beetles. But did the cane toad accomplish their mission? Make a guess. Well, sort of. First, cane toads are not very good jumper, and a lot of the cane beetles were actually high up on the sugarcane plant. So the cane toad could not jump high enough to eat those beetles. They could only feed on those nearer on the ground. Secondly, cane toads are a toxic, invasive species, notorious for devouring anything that it can fit in its mouth. So the native insects, small birds, reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals became its prey, since it did not eat enough cane beetles to be full. Thirdly, cane toads are poisonous, which means any predators eating them will end up dying instead. So potential predators start to stay away from these poisonous toads. So, with no natural predators, and being able to breed almost any time of the year, the cane toad become the very pest they are supposed to destroy. And worse, they started to spread beyond Queensland into the Northern Territory and part of Western Australia. As of today, there are more than 200 million cane toads residing in Australia as permanent residents, and it's still expanding their invasion at a rate of 50 kilometers every year. The situation is so bad that in certain parts of Australia, they started the Great Cane Toad Bust event. But no, don't worry, the event is not about killing them with a hammer or a baseball bat. It's about catching fertile adult cane toads from the environment before they have an opportunity to breed. What you have just seen and heard is the classic example of the very first system archetype we are looking into today: fixes that fail. This archetype describes a situation where a fix, although effective in the short term, end up causing side effects for the long-term behavior of the system, and may even result in the need for even more fixes. To understand this better, we'll be using a causal loop diagram. A causal loop diagram can be used to map out action and reaction and study and understand complex scenarios. It consists of 4 basic elements: the variables, the link between them, the sign on the links, whether is it in the same direction or in the opposite direction, and the sign on the loop, whether it's a balancing or reinforcing loop. So, for our fixes that fail system archetype, first, we have the problem symptoms. Then, we identify a short-term fix for these symptoms, which seems to solve the problem. The blue line with a S indicates a same direction flow for both variables. In this case, when we have more problem symptoms, we apply more fixes. The red line with an O indicates an opposite direction flow for the variables. When we apply more fixes, we will have less problem symptoms. Similarly, if you apply less fixes, the problem symptoms increases. This type of loop is known as a balancing loop. However, a fix might have unintended consequences, which will increase the problem symptoms. This type of loop is known as a reinforcing loop. What makes it challenging is that there could be a delay before the unintended consequence manifests. If we do not see the unintended consequence fast enough, we will continue to apply the fix until the unintended consequence blew up in our face, like in the case of the cane toads. Breaking the fixes that fail cycle requires 2 actions. First, we need to acknowledge upfront that the fix is merely alleviating a symptom, and then make a commitment to solve the real problem as soon as possible. Launching this two-pronged attack of applying the fix and planning out the fundamental solution will help us ensure that we don't get caught in a perpetual cycle of solving yesterday's solution. Let's use a work example, a project delay, to illustrate this system archetype fixes that fail. For those who have been in a project before, project delay is a pretty common sight. If we are behind schedule, one of the most common solutions that will pop up to us is to get the team to work overtime to catch up. This may seem a quick and easy fix, but what is the delay unintended consequence? The more overtime people work, the more likely they will fall sick. And the more people fall sick, the more delay there will be to the projects. In a worst case scenario, people might even start quitting their job as there's just no more work-life balance. So just bear in mind, while overtime can help us to catch up on project delay, it should not be taken as a long-term or permanent fix. We will still need to find the real root cause on why the project is delayed and apply the fundamental solution to get the project back on track. Okay, Let's move on to the next system archetype. It was a hot day outdoor, with the temperature soaring to a 36 degrees Celsius. A man came home from work and was perspiring all over. He did what most of us would probably do, blasting the aircon, setting it at 22 degrees Celsius. However, it was still very warm and stuffy inside the house, as the house had been baked throughout the day by the hot sun. So, the man did not want to stay inside the house and decided to go out for a jog, hoping that the house would be cooler when he returned. Moments later, the man's wife returned home from work as well. When she stepped inside the house, she noticed that the air condition was switched on at 22 degrees Celsius. She felt annoyed that someone had forgotten to switch off the air condition when they left for work in the morning, totally unaware that her husband had actually just switched on the air conditioner. Like her husband, the house was too warm and stuffy for her. So, she went to lower the air conditioner temperature to 19 degrees Celsius, thinking that 22 degrees Celsius was still too warm. She then went off to the kitchen to prepare for dinner for the family. An hour later, the man came home from his job. When he stepped inside the house, he was greeted by a freezing blast, nearly turning him into a snowman. You might be wondering then, how come the wife did not feel the freeze? Well, the answer was because of the heat generated from the stove and cooking, the kitchen temperature was actually at a very comfortable level. So, what just happened here? What we just witnessed is an example of another system archetype, balancing process with delay. This system archetype explains that the system in which the response to action is delayed. If we do not perceive the delay feedback, we might overshoot or underestimate the required action in order to reach our goal. In the air conditioner example, the wife was not aware that the husband had set the air conditioner temperature to 22 degrees Celsius. And because of that, she thought that the house temperature was actually at 22 degrees Celsius when she returned home, and thus lowered the temperature further in an effort to cool down the house faster. Have this happened to you before? It's a definite yes for me. Now, let's use a causal loop diagram to understand this archetype further. We start off with a desired level that we want to reach and an existing gap. In order to close the gap, we take the necessary corrective action. The bigger the gap, the more corrective action we take. This corrective action helps to bring us closer to the actual level that we want. The more corrective action taken, the closer we get to the actual level. And when we reach closer to the actual level, the gap will reduce. But some corrective action have delay. And in this case, the air conditioner, which is the system, need time to cool the house to the set temperature. It just doesn't happen in a snap. In such a system, when the corrective action become aggressive, we might end up with an even more negative gap. So, how do we overcome this problem? First, be patient. As the saying goes, patience is a virtue. Give the system and the process time to do their work. Be aware that there is delay. Do not rush our corrective action or be overly aggressive with our corrective action, hoping that the system will work faster. It just doesn't work that way. Like keep pressing the leave button and thinking that the leaf will come faster. I know some of us do that. Next, explore how we can improve the system response. Look for ways to shorten the time it takes for the system to reach the desired goal. For the air conditioner example, maybe we can increase the power or the capacity of the aircon system to address the slow response. At work, we can use Lean to help identify and remove various waste in the system or process, and thus streamlining and improving the cycle time. Let's go back to our work example, the project delay. When a project delay, another very common strategy is to hire more people to put onto the project. Ideally, more people will mean less project delay, right? The answer is both yes and no. In the long run, probably yes. But in the short term, no. Why? Because there is delay. And why is there delay in reducing the project delay after adding new people or more people? To understand that, we first look at the reason for this delay. We'll use the Tuckman Stages of Group Development Framework. This framework describes how teams move from stages known as forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning over a period of time. The ideal stage for all teams to reach in this framework is the performing stage. But that takes time and effort to reach. And also, whenever there's a disruption to the team, like new people join the team or existing people quitting, there is a high chance that the team will move back in the stages and will take time to move forward again. The second reason for the delay is the learning curve. For someone new to join a team, it will take time for the new joiner to get up to speed on the existing working processes, technology used, and how the team works together. And in order for the new joiner to get up to speed, someone will need to train and guide them. And who will be that someone? Well, you're right, the existing team members. So more time is actually taken away from the existing team members, meaning less time to work on the project, and thus even more delay. Which is why it's never ideal to just add people in a project team if you want to quickly reduce the project delay. Okay, are you ready for the third system archetype? Let's go. Ever since Tom started working overtime to catch up on the project, he developed a nagging headache. It was so bad that he decided to consult a doctor. Before he could consult the doctor, someone in his team suggested that he try a new painkiller from the pharmacy, which was said to be able to help relieve the nagging headache. Heeding the advice of his teammate, he purchased the painkiller from the pharmacy, which worked like a miracle. One pill and the headache was gone. Over the next few weeks of overtime, whenever he had a headache, he took this painkiller. It became his BFF. But unknown to him, the underlying root cause was actually worsening for every single day he postponed consulting a doctor. And then, one not so fine day, Tom collapsed while at work and ended up in the hospital. He had to go through a very painful and expensive surgery to cure his nagging headache once and for all, or else he might end up not being able to work forever. This is a classic situation of the next system archetype, shifting the burden. This archetype warns us about the long-term consequences of relying on a symptomatic approach to addressing problems. Once again, let's look at it using a causal loop diagram. First, there is a problem. Whenever there is a problem, our brains are wired to solve it quickly. So we quickly apply a symptomatic solution, or in other words, a cure focused on tackling the symptoms, not the root cause. And since the solution is quick and seems to work, we get used to applying it whenever the same problem symptoms appear. But there are always consequences or side effects to it. And one of the most critical side effects is that we get so used to the quick fix because it's working that we stop consider any other alternative solution. We stop thinking about finding a fundamental solution that can solve our problems, for good. Instead, we focus on the quick symptomatic solution. But why do we not try to find the fundamental solution? Well, because good things usually take time, and time is a luxury we cannot always afford. Some of you might be thinking, hey Aaron, shifting the burdens and fixes that fail seems quite similar. They do look similar, but there is one major difference between these two archetypes. Shifting the burden requires a deeper understanding of what is needed to keep the system healthy than fixes that fail. This is because addressing a shifting the burden scenario often requires identifying not so much a solution to a problem, but rather the fundamental capability or solution that we need to develop over the longer term. So, to solve this problem, we should start searching for the root cause. The faster the search for the root cause start, the faster the fundamental solution can start to work. Start searching for and eliminating possibility before treating symptoms. Since treating symptoms could hide the root cause, do not confuse symptoms as root cause. Okay. In the event we need to address the problem quickly, carefully apply symptomatic solution. Choose short-term solutions that provide relief for the worst symptoms of the problem. Try to use short-term solutions that do not mask the fundamental problems. Use it only to buy time for the fundamental solution to work. And if we have to apply any symptomatic solution, keep a lookout for any of them that no longer work. Remove them to reduce the avoidable and unnecessary effort and any cluttering. Use this safe effort to find and make your fundamental solution works. Okay, so once again, let's go back to our project delay example. If an organization deems hiring new people to reduce the project delay as the fundamental solution, what will be the symptomatic solution then? If you guess outsourcing, you're correct. With a good outsourcing company, we can definitely reduce the project delay. But the side effect could be we become too reliant on the outsourcing company. Maybe they did such a great job that we decided that there is no longer a need to hire any new staff for the projects. So, is outsourcing a good or bad strategy here? Very much would depend on the core capability we are trying to develop. If developing our internal capability is our core need, then over-reliance on outsourcing will be an unhealthy situation. Because if the outsourcing company leaves, we'll be stranded. But if we do not need to develop our internal capability to perform certain work, then outsourcing will be a great strategy. It will help us to focus on other important capabilities that we need to develop, while outsourcing will patch the gap on those non-core capabilities. Okay, time for our fourth system archetype. For this archetype, let's play a short video.
A frog is a cold-blooded animal, and humans are warm-blooded, so our body burns energy or perspires to maintain the same 98.6 degrees. The cold-blooded frog's body temperature goes up and down with the temperature of its surroundings. Although frogs love water, when I hold it over this pot of boiling water, this frog is very uncomfortable and climbs to get away from it. Now, the water in this pot is room temperature, 69.4 degrees, so he's comfortable when I put him in. If I turn the burner on low flame, his body temperature will adjust and slowly he will heat up with the water. The water temperature has risen to 80 degrees and the frog is the same temperature and still comfortable. If I turn up the burner slowly again, he won't notice because he'll continue to change to be the same as his surroundings. When we started, I held the frog over the first pot of boiling water. He was uncomfortable and he tried to get away from the heat. But now, because we're raising the temperature slowly, he doesn't recognize the danger he's in. He just keeps going along with the changes in his surroundings. Eventually, we can turn up the burner to a deadly boil. He will just keep trying to adjust with it. By the time he realizes it's killing him, it's too late. He won't notice the time because he just keeps changing himself to go along with the changes in his surroundings.
Okay. The name of this archetype is called drifting ghost, also known as boy frog syndrome. This archetype works in the following manner. There is a certain goal, either implicit or explicit, which is compared to the current or actual state. If a gap persists, corrective action are taken to improve the current state and bring it in line with the goal. A delay between the corrective action and the actual state represents the fact that result might take minutes to years to materialize, depending on the specific situation. Of course, there's more than one way to close the gap. In this archetype, a second loop is driven by the pressure to lower the goal. As the goal increases or persists over a period of time, the pressure to lower the goal increases. If the pressure is high and persistent, the goal may be lowered, thereby decreasing the gap. The critical difference between the two loops is that lowering the goal immediately closes the gap, whereas corrective action usually takes time. But is lowering the goal what we really want? Will it come back and haunt us later? In the boiling frog case, the goal is a desired body temperature. If the gap between this desired temperature and the water temperature is large, the frog will immediately take a corrective action, which is to jump out of the boiling water. But if the temperature increases gradually, the gap between the ideal temperature and the water temperature widens slowly. As this happens, the frog perceived desired temperature may gradually drift higher. This closes the gap between the desired and the actual temperature, negating the need to take corrective action, which is to jump out of the water. The reason why drifting goal is also known as the boy frog syndrome is that organization goals, like the frog ideal temperature, tend to drift slowly and usually go unnoticed. Similar to the frog that does not recognize a gradual rise in temperature, we are often unalarmed by the deteriorating performance if it occurs over a long period of time, until it's too late. Under such circumstances, the most important thing for us to do is to remove this pressure to lower goals. Search for better way to close the gap and be patient, just like the balancing process with delay archetype. Be aware that lowering goals in the short term will have an even greater impact and consequence to our long-term goals. Now, back to our project delay example. In project management, we have what is known as the triple constraint: scope, cost, and time. When a project gets delayed, we tend to look at whether we can reduce the scope or increase the budget to get more people in or consider outsourcing, or ask for more time to complete the project. Usually, the answer to all these questions is no, no, and no. Then, what else can we consider to help reduce the project delay? Maybe we'll start thinking whether we can do less testing. Maybe we can hardcode certain parameters instead of making them configurable if it's a software project. Or maybe we just fix really critical defects. If you agree to any of the mentioned, then the quality of your project will go down. But very likely, you'll buy us some time to catch up on our schedule. In the long run, we'll incur debts that we will still need to repay because of the lowered quality. Or, in the worst case scenario, the quality is so bad, the project failed after launch. So now, you can see the importance to disconnect the pressure to reduce goal. Now, to our last system archetype. Consider a situation where there is two project managers, Tom and Jerry, both responsible for managing similar projects. Their manager, Nancy, has a fixed amount of resources. Initially, she allocates equal amount of resources to both project managers, and both project managers are doing well. Then, for some reasons, Nancy chooses to allocate more resource to Tom's project than Jerry's. And when that happens, Tom's project becomes more successful. Seeing that Tom's project is getting more successful, Nancy wants to allocate even more resource to Tom. So she takes from Jerry and give it to Tom. This new allocation helped to make Tom's project even more successful and makes Jerry's project less so. The success of Tom's overshadows Jerry and encourages Nancy to allocate even more to Tom, since she rather support a winner than a loser. What she doesn't realize is that she is in fact creating this winner and loser situation through her allocation. This behavior is what we call success to the successful and less for the rest. This system archetype describes the outcome of a situation, which is highly dependent on the initial condition and whether it favors one party or the other. We also term it as self-fulfilling prophecies. As you can see in the causal loop diagram, when more resources are allocated to A get more successful. And when B become less successful because of the less resources available to B. This structure continues to reinforce the success of one and eventual demise of the other. Just think of how this can potentially apply to our desire to work, to spend more time at work instead of with our family. The more overtime we spend at work, the more our relationship at home deteriorate. This makes life more complicated and painful to the point that we give less and less attention to our family. Overcoming this system dynamic is difficult because of the momentum that occurs from the reinforcing success loop. The very first thing that we can do to overcome this is to identify and acknowledge that particular resource that is unequally distributed. These resources could be time, money, people, or attention. Seek to understand why it was set up to create just one winner. And from there, break this resource trap and balance the distribution of this resource. Another way to break out of this archetype is to get rid of its competitive structure and find ways to make team collaborators rather than competitors. The success to successful archetype highlights this need to create a win-win environment, whereas collaboration and cooperation replaces competition. And success for all is more important than just trying to identify successful individuals. So, have you seen this archetype at work? Or maybe even been caught in one currently? So, in today's session, we look at a total of 5 different system archetypes within a complex system. Fixes that fail, short-term fixes that work but created side effects in the long term, balancing process with delay, where corrective action has a delay, shifting the burden, getting too comfortable with a short-term fix that we stop looking for a fundamental solution, drifting goals, where we shift our goalposts in order to meet our goal, but inevitably leading to the deterioration of long-term goals. And lastly, success to the successful, where there is an unbalanced distribution of resources, resulting in one party more successful than the other. Understanding the problem is the very first step to successfully solving it. With system archetype, you'll be able to see the subsystem behavior and thus applying the correct fix to the problem. So with that, I'll open the floor to answer any questions that you may have regarding the system archetype that we have just went through. So do key in your questions in the Zoom chat and I'll answer them accordingly. Okay, so let me have a look at what are some of the questions that we have on the Zoom on the Q&A. So I do have one question on what are the further books that we can read regarding this topic. So one very good book that I would recommend will be this book called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Sirch. So do check out the book because that is a very good read on system archetype and actually beyond that as well. Because system archetype is just one technique that we can use to help us identify the complex problem. There are actually a lot of other techniques as well. Okay. Let me just wait for a while to see if there's any other question. Okay. Okay. By the way, okay, some of you might be worried because the video of the boiling frog ended showing only the star frog. Okay, there's actually another portion of it showing a fake frog that was used in this video. So there's no frog injured at all. Okay, on this. You can always also check out the same video that is also on YouTube. Okay. Because some might worry, say, Aaron, you go and boil a real frog just to show us this scenario. No, I didn't do that. Okay, with that, I think I thanks everyone for your attention. I thank everyone for coming to join me. Oh, hang on first. Okay, I have one more questions. Okay. Okay, ideas in distributed control systems seem to have some parallel to this field. Yes, definitely. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this comment. Okay. In fact, when we look at system archetype, it actually doesn't have a particular application area. Okay. System archetype is really for us to identify the patterns that can exist in any domain. Okay, with that, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy the session and stay on for the next session as well. I wish you all the best. Okay, and hope to see you again.